What is going on, guys? Carter here with Edge Mindset. We're talking we're talking Striders, but we're going to talk about history, baby. We're going to go back in time, get in that time machine, grab yourself a nice latte or a barley soda, road beer, whatever you want. Hop in this time machine. Let's go back and talk about some interesting Strider knives. Two Strider knives that I had way back in the day. We're talking like 2013, 14, somewhere around there, that I own these two knives. We're going to talk about those because there's two interesting things about me owning and selling those knives that I think you'll find mind-blowing, especially if you are a newer Strider fan in particular. Some of you old guys, it's not going to be that crazy. You're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that. But for newer Strider guys, people that have been into these knives for, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and newer are going to be, I think you're going to find it interesting. So before I jump into the story, what do we have in front of you? These are the only 3 Strider knives I currently have in my collection. That will be changing soon. Little hint, hint. It will be changing a little bit soon. We've got an old school big pin SMF CC here. Really cool knife, tiger striping. We've got the MEFP SNG. And then we've got the fixed blade that I can never remember what it's called. I was going to say this is the only Strider fixed blade I've ever owned, but that's not true. I've owned, I think, one other maybe. Just not a big fixed blade guy, but I needed to get myself a Strider fixed blade, so there it is. What is the steel on this? I want to say, yeah, CTS XHP. So the first one I want to talk about, and this is going to kind of segue into how different Striders are now and kind of the knife community as a whole. The first one I bought was a mixed Strider custom GB. So it's the frame lock version, GB, Tanto custom. I'm going to try to find a photo of this thing. I don't have a photo of it, but I'm going to scour the internet and put a photo in here. Hopefully, if you see a photo in here, it means I found it. If you don't, it means I couldn't find it. I actually have a video. I have videos on both of these knives from like way back in the day. So they're out there if you want to go see me drone on about these knives. Just keep in mind, I'm not a great YouTuber now in terms of my ability to speak and be interesting. I was way worse back then. So we're talking some dry, mumbling video type stuff. Not to mention, it looks like the video was shot with a literal potato. So the quality is poor, but they're out there if you want to find them. I just wanted to let you know what you're in for if you go find those videos. I do have videos showing both of these knives, but I picked up this custom GB. I'm pretty sure I got it on maybe Blade Forums or USN, something like that, because we didn't have Facebook groups back then. Didn't have Reddit knife swap groups back then. So those were the only places to buy on the secondary. I picked it up. Let me paint the picture for you. Hand ground, nightmare ground blade, signed by Mixed Strider. Beautiful blade. It had a G10 front scale one piece, like normal, just like this, right? Single piece with the backspacer. Caveman sculpt. And if you haven't seen the Caveman sculpt, it's something Mixed Strider did quite a lot back in those days. It was kind of their signature or his signature look for a lot of his knives. But it was basically like this organic shape carved into it. It almost made it look like it was some sort of like ribbed grub type thing. It was pretty cool effect. Still holds up today in my opinion, and if I found the picture you'll see what I'm talking about. Still a very cool looking finish, and it would be awesome if Mick out of the blue did that again, which he has brought back some old blade finishes and things, so that would be really cool if he brought back the caveman finish. I think people would go wild, and like I said, in my opinion it still holds up. Same thing on the titanium side. It was bronzed, so not flamed, and then it had the same caveman pattern into the back scale here. Now, that's not really the interesting thing. I mean, it is an interesting knife, and man, I wish I still had that thing. I mean, talk about like a show-stopping piece if I could whip that baby out. But the main thing I wanted to talk about, what's interesting, is if memory serves, and it may or may not serve, I think I paid around $700 for this knife. And at that point in time, that was it's still a lot of money, but it was a lot of money for me at that time. I'm going to blow that number out of the water here on the next knife, but it was a considerable amount of money for me. However, I do regret it because I could have made that one work. Like I could have kept that knife and just cooled my jets on buying new stuff. And I didn't. I went to sell it for the same reason I buy and sell now for the most part, because I want to get new stuff. I want to make new YouTube content. I've always had this dream of being a knife YouTuber. And in order to do that, I've got to get new things in to talk about, and I can't keep everything, right? So I went to sell it, and here's the thing. Nobody would buy it. Nobody wanted to buy it for $700. A mixed Strider custom GB. This thing was beautiful. Nobody would pay for it. Nobody would buy it. I ended up having to sell it to a guy in Germany and do international shipping, which anybody that's done shipping, I mean, it's not like it's a terrible process, but it adds more work. There's more risk, right? Because you're dealing with customs and how to fill out the form right. And there's just more moving pieces and more ways for it to get lost. Not to mention, it takes longer for the person getting the knife to get it and give you the thumbs up so that you can finally relax and say, cool, deal's done. So I didn't like doing international shipping, but it was the only person that would buy this thing. So I sold it to a guy in Germany, shipped it internationally because nobody wanted to buy this knife. And if you know anything about Strider knives now, that sounds absurd. If you were to throw that up, it would be gone in a second, not even for $700. If you were to throw it up for a market appropriate price, it would be gone in seconds. But that's not how things were back then. It's not how they were back then. In those days, and this is for the young bucks getting into Striders, those that know are going to say, yeah, I remember that. Back in those days, you could just buy Strider knives from stores. Like you just go there and buy knives. Monkey Edge, you'd go to Monkey Edge and they would just have a bunch of Striders. And not just normal Striders. They would have Starling Gear collabs just sitting there. Now, yes, some of them would fly off the shelves quick, right? The more popular ones. But you could just go buy them. You could go look at them and buy them. I've got videos on this channel of me showing a Monkey Edge exclusive SMF double gunner grip. And in that video, I mentioned how I bought two of them. I bought two of them. I just went there and bought two of them. Now, I'm pretty sure they had kind of the old school concept of a drop, right? Drops were different then because communication was slower. You didn't have push notifications from apps. There was no apps. There was no smartphones back then. I know, crazy time. The only way you could possibly get information about drops and things was through email. And so, yeah, they would still do drops. I'm pretty sure there was a certain day and a time that they're like, hey, we're going to have these knives. And I was aware of that and I went there, but it was not like it is now. It was not like refresh, copying your card, add to cart. Oh, I got it. You could just go there and buy them. And as long as you didn't sit and wait for a day, they would be there. You could just buy these knives. And also just general Striders, like multiple retailers carried Striders. And for the most part, unless you were looking for a very, very specific configuration, you could just go buy the knife you wanted. Double gunner grips, SNGs, SMFs, they would just be there. Now, maybe you were like, oh, I wanted a black oxide blade and green gunner grips, and nobody has them right now, so I gotta wait a few weeks until more come in. That was like the most of it. Stark contrast to now. So let's go to the second knife. So the second knife was around the same time. I think it was a little bit after that. And this was the most expensive thing I had ever purchased up to that point. And honestly, it's on par with some of the more expensive things I buy now. So I bought this knife knowing I had no business of owning it, right? So, most knives, I buy them with the intention of keeping them, right? And we know how that usually works out. But at least that's my intention, is I'm going to keep them and own them. But sometimes there's knives where I jump on them because I just want to check them out. I want to do some content. I know I can resell them. I know I can't keep it because it's just too expensive. I don't have the money. This was one of those, like way back in the day. This was one of those. $2,000 for this knife. I had no business buying anything for $2,000. I had young kids. I was young in my career. Even now, I have no business buying anything for that amount of money, but I especially didn't then. Like not even close. My YouTube channel was making nothing. Not that it's making barely above nothing now, but it was really making nothing then. So I bought this knife, and once again, I'll try to put a picture up here, but I'll paint the picture. It was an SMF, Cobalt Damascus blade, Nightmare Ground. So mixed Strider, always has and continues to forge his own Damascus. Now, he has used like Chad Nichols here or there. Like he's used some outside made Damascus on some one-offs, but by and large, 95% of the time, Mick Strider forges his own Damascus and uses his own Damascus. So had the Cobalt Damascus blade. It had a Cobalt Damascus front scale, and then it had a bronze titanium back, and I think it also had the caveman sculpting on the front scale and the back scale. You know, beautiful piece, very unique. I would say that this is kind of a tangent. I don't really regret selling that one because honestly, it didn't really do it for me visually. You know, all those pieces, like I appreciated the Damascus. Like I knew it was like total upscale knife that I had no business having. But in terms of just like liking the way it looked, it didn't quite do it for me. It was very slick with the Damascus and stuff. But anyways, that's a side note. Neither here nor there. So I bought this from a site called mattdtactical.com. He was one of the Strider dealers. Fun fact, somebody told me he's still around and that he works for Knife Center, I think. I think he's one of the big guys over at Knife Center now. So that site is shut down in case anybody's trying to Google it to see if they have any like old Strider stock. They do not. It's gone. But Matt D Tactical, and this was not a thing where I got some word about a secret drop of these Damascus knives and I was fired up and ready. I came across them. You know, I just occasionally go around to different Strider dealers and see what they had. And I went to Matt D Tactical, and they had two of these knives there for $2,000 each. I don't remember if they were exactly the same or if there was like a slight difference. I think they were pretty much the same, if not exactly the same. They had two of them. And, you know, like usual, my first thought was, I can't afford that. I have no business. That's amazing. How cool would that be? There's no way I could ever buy something like that. And then you leave the site and your brain starts thinking and you're like, well, maybe if I sell this thing and sell that thing and I don't buy anything for 6 months and, you know, you start working it out and you start getting, well, maybe, you know, I throw it on the credit card, check it out. I could sell it. I know I could sell it. So I talked myself into it. Went back to the site, still there. A day or two later, both of them still there. Bought that one. The second one hung out for I don't know how long. Just sitting there. High-end Mick Strider Damascus Customs. Just sitting at a retailer. Because that's how it was back then. You know. So I bought this knife. There's more to this story. Which is kind of interesting. And I still have some questions about this. I buy this knife. I get it. Right. Super excited. I get it. Open it up. The tip's bent. Like, you know, maybe a 1/4 inch from the tip. I think it had like a dagger ground blade, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty thin at the tip, and it was bent. I'm like, what the hell? So I shoot an email to Mick Strider directly, because you could do that then. I don't know, maybe you still can now. I don't think so. Shot it to him directly. He immediately responded and was like, oh, that sucks, bro. Send it in, and I'll fix it. And so I send it in to Mick Strider. He forges me a brand new blade and sends it back to me in, I kid you not, like 2 weeks. Imagine doing that today. Imagine doing that with Strider today. Now, I do kind of wonder, though, even at that time, it seemed a little too easy, and it seemed a little too... Now, I'm going to go off the rails here on total speculation. I have no idea. Total speculation. But I do remember it felt like that process was a little too easy, even for that day and age. Because I remember thinking, like, he really didn't push back on it. He didn't say, are you sure you didn't drop it? You know, did you do anything with it? Did you try to stab it in something? You know, sometimes, you know, these blades, blah, blah, blah. He didn't do any of that. He just said, maybe it got warped in heat treat. Send it in. And I did. And he forged me a brand new blade. So either that was just the most awesome experience I've ever had working with a knife person in my entire life, and they just really were that open and like, yeah, send it in, we'll fix it. Or I do kind of wonder if maybe they knew something was wrong with that knife. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he knew it was bent and it accidentally got sent out, or maybe Matt D Tactical, something happened to it and he thought it was fine, but then the second I brought it up, Matt was like, oh crap, you know, I did accidentally drop that one. I thought it was good, but I guess not. and told Mick about it. I don't know. That's just conjecture. It just felt even too easy of a process to get a whole new Damascus forged blade. But the fact I got that knife back in 2 weeks is bonkers. Completely crazy. That would never happen now. And not because Mick's not a good guy. It's just, it's a different, they're busy. They're clogged up with hundreds of knives, getting warranty work. They're cranking out knives. The economic conditions are way harder now. Margins have to be tighter and things have to be more efficient. And, unfortunately, manufacturing knives in the U.S. has just progressively gotten more and more difficult and more cost prohibitive. And with the influx of overseas made knives, you just don't get the volume that you used to get. It's more diluted now. So it's a bit more of a bespoke product this day and age, which, another tangent here, people asking why these knives are so expensive. I mean, that's why, because it's not money grubbing. It's not people being greedy. It's not Mick and Marissa and Josh like living high on the hog in some mansion somewhere. It's because manufacturing has gotten so difficult and expensive in this country. Being able to support employees has gotten so expensive, and the options of cheap overseas knives has diluted the drive for these things. Your options are to have really high margins for a smaller group of people, or just fold and do something else. The days of being able to produce production knives in the U.S. that are a little more bespoke, that appeal to a smaller group of people, like Striders, right? Those days are just seem to be gone. I don't think they're ever going to come back. It's just not something that can be done. But anyway, so yeah, a couple cool stories, blast from the past on Strider, how different things used to be. And at the time, I had no vision that they would change, right? And you may be wondering, why would you ever sell those? And it's, I was also young in life and young in the knife world. And the concept of Strider knives kind of splitting and the market changing, and all of a sudden these things are going to be harder and harder to get, just didn't cross my mind. In my mind, these were all things that I could rebuy and re-get, and it's just all part of the game, and you buy and you sell and blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't really thinking it was some big loss. I was just eyeing the next thing I wanted to get, and of course in hindsight, that was dumb. But it's hard when it may seem now like, how did you not know Strider knives would just continue to be more and more valuable and sought after? Same reason you can't really do it now. It's, you got blinders on, you don't know what's going to happen. Everything kind of just seems the same, and you never know what's going to really catch on. Because I'm really going wild on tangents now. Strider knives are pretty unique. They have a really big overseas interest. So a lot of people in other countries really gravitate towards these knives, especially like the customs, and they will pay top dollar. A lot of these knives, and not really the production ones necessarily, especially the custom knives, they're going overseas. They're going to Israel. They're going to Saudi Arabia. They're going to China. They're a lot of affluent people in other countries, for some reason, really gravitate towards custom Strider knives. And I know I don't have a custom here, but use your imagination, because that's what the point of this video is. They really gravitate towards that brand specifically. They like all of them, right? They all have traction, but it seems like Striders, for some reason, have really gained a hold in other countries as being highly desirable. And so they sell and they move out of country quite a bit, it seems like. And I know when I buy higher end Striders and I sell them, a good portion of them leave the country. Now, I'm not shipping direct out of the country, but I recognize when they're using a forwarding service, and a lot of them leave. So just kind of interesting how some of these things happen. How some knives kind of have legacy standing and they kind of last forever and they remain popular, and other ones kind of disappear and fade away into obscurity. All right, guys, I've rambled on long enough. Comment down below what your opinions on any of this is, any insight, things like that. Love to hear it. I'll catch you guys on the next video.